There we go. Welcome, everybody. I'm Virginia Gary with the SysG Group. Welcome to today's Social Change Career Series. I'm with SysG's BGI Foundation, which seeks to prepare future leaders in the social sector. And part of that great work, we invite speakers as part of the Social Change Career Series to come and share with us their career journey and any advice that they might have to our current and future leaders. So with that, I'm really excited today to introduce our special guest speaker, Laura Chávez, who is the Executive Director of Challenge Day. And just to give you a little bit of a heads up, as far as the agenda, I'll go ahead and ask Laura some questions that I'm dying to know about her and her career journey. And then I want to open it up to the audience. So have your questions ready. Feel free to type them in the chat box as we go along. And we'll have some time in the end to cover some questions from audience members. So without further ado, Laura, please introduce us to yourself and give us some background on your career journey.
I'm really excited to be here and spend the day with you all. Thank you, Virginia. Well, my name is Laura Chávez. My pronouns are she and they, and I am from California. I'm currently, it's really interesting because we're in the pandemic. I'm currently right now in Southern California, but my residence is in the San Francisco Bay Area. And as Virginia mentioned, I'm the executive director of an organization, a national organization we called Challenge Day. And what we do is we do empathy and compassion workshops in middle schools and high schools across the country, and also college campuses and nonprofits and businesses as well. So a little bit about me. I'm the youngest of 7. I'm in a really proud Latinx from a single parent household, immigrant household, and I don't know if any of you have a large family as mine, but you know how interesting those kind of environments are. A little chaotic, but so much fun as well. And so, as the youngest person in that household, I was in a really supportive, but like I said, also chaotic household. And so it was just I always looked for really interesting mentors or people kind of to follow in my community outside. And so I grew up in San Diego, in a suburb of San Diego. And as soon as I could, I graduated from high school and ended up in the Bay Area, and I haven't been back only to visit family. But yeah, that's a little bit about me. I'm also a parent to 2 kids. We were talking about it earlier. I have a 6-year-old kindergartner and a preschooler trying to juggle their distance learning while working full time. So if any of you are parents, or if you have younger siblings in there, you know how interesting that is. Let me see. Yeah, I feel like that's a good start of me and where I'm from.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure some people might have some questions for you regarding parenting tips with young ones during this unique time. So you discussed Challenge Day very briefly. Could you tell us a little bit more about how Challenge Day goes about fulfilling its mission of building empathy and compassion in communities?
Yeah, so it's actually really interesting. It's actually a unique program. And what we do is provide really engaging and thought-provoking exercises. And really what we do is we get students and adults together in the same room, and we begin to kind of break the walls that people typically have. So we talk a lot about cliques, and we talk a lot about injustices. We talk a lot about people that are different. And through these kind of engaging, kind of thought-provoking exercises, we begin to kind of build community, do a little bit of storytelling, talk a lot about the differences that people may have, and really the goal is to build more unity, build community, build a little bit of a consensus. We believe at Challenge Day that we are more similar than we are different, and we are not born hating. This is all, it's through our lived experiences. And so what we try and do it through these various exercises is really engage in the humanistic kind of similarities and we're big around kind of belonging. And we talk a lot about diversity and inclusion, but I think our theme is around is really belonging, right? And finding the similarities and through all of those actions.
I love that you brought up belonging and diversity and equity. A big part of SISG's work right now is JEDI work, justice,
Great.
equity, diversity, and inclusion, something we're very passionate about promoting in communities and through our work. So I'm wondering, in your work, given everything that's going on right now with racial equity issues, are you seeing that impact your work, or what is Challenge Day doing as far as racial equity?
I think, we've been around for 35 years, and I feel like we've always centered equity, right, in everything that we do. I think when we're trying to build unity within communities, it's always been embedded in who we are as an organization. What has been really interesting, though, is how predominantly we work with schools, university settings, right? And what has been really interesting for us this past year, is more of the intentionality. I think what is happening right now with the educational system is they're finally taking the time and the effort to not only learn about equity work, but also they're putting their dollars, they're being intentional, they're looking at their systems. And so now we're getting phone calls about, because, we're a trusted organization. We've been around for 35 years. And so now we're like, we're finally having these conversations about unconscious bias, microaggressions, racial equity and justice. Can you come in and begin these conversations with us? We go in there, we create the safe container, we build that community. And because we're an outside provider, I feel like it is a little bit safer, particularly for the diversity that exists in a lot of those rooms, right? To be able to share and learn from one another. And so it's been a lot of fun, honestly. I think what we were able to do during the pandemic is obviously, as every organization has been doing, is like pivot and pivot and pivot. And so we went from one program to over 15 programs. And a lot of these programs center equity and center diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think it's really fantastic that now schools are calling us and they're saying, we want to intentionally bring you to the school to talk about racial equity, to talk about unconscious bias and, microaggressions and these kinds of things. And so we're doing a lot of work with the adults, and which has been new for us around this work. But we're also doing work with the young people as well. So it's been really powerful. But again, this is something that we've been doing along for a really long time. But now there's a little bit more intentionality. I think for us, we're sharing a lot more about who we are and our values and our personal stories and our personal kind of lived experiences. And so it's been really powerful to see that evolution internally as an organization, and to also finally have our partners that are saying, hey, can you come and help us? We're ready to have this conversation, which has been really fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that word intentionality. And I see some folks in the chat box also said that, that's key. And that's definitely something that we've noticed as well, more people being intentional about this work, this important work. Absolutely. So overall, how do you feel your work makes a difference in social issues or for social good?
I mean, I think it just goes back to our entire mission, right? It's and how we're just centering, belonging. I think we've learned so much from this pandemic, this world that we've been living in, and also the civil unrest that's been happening. And so for us, we are centering. We believe that social change happens when people from diverse groups and are able to work in collaboration with one another, right? That's when we believe, social good or social change kind of happens. And so for us, we center vulnerability, we center storytelling, which what we try and do is provide a voice to those individuals that have not had an opportunity to voice in a safe space. We provide learning opportunities, listening opportunities to those that have been more at the forefront. So we're asking people to step back. We're asking people to step forward. And so it's this kind of idea of uplifting marginalized folks and educating those that have been more in a privileged position. And what we call it is make the magic happen in a safe space, right? And I think it's been really great to be part of this kind of like movement. You know, for us, it's, you know, we think social impact, social good, social justice is built around this idea of unity, healing, compassion, and empathy. And so that's what we try and do in our work.
I love that. Social change happens when people from diverse groups come together. I wrote that down because I love that. And I want to talk a little bit about your lived experience.
Sure.
Because when we first spoke, I know you had discussed your multiple layers of identity. You said, you know, Latinx, immigrant family in the beginning. How would you say these multiple layers of identity and your intersections and your lived experiences inform the way you approach your work and also intertwine with your leadership?
I mean, it's embedded, right? I think all of the different intersections of my background, from being a queer woman, BIPOC, just masculine presenting immigrant, is part of the entire makeup that makes me the leader that I am today. And it's funny, you know, for me, it's, you know, at times, you know, I think there has been really intentionality and a lot of kind of personal searching that I've had to do to be able to step up when I needed to step up, but also not be tokenized. And so be a voice when I needed to be a voice. Step back when I just wanted to represent Laura and not represent everyone in my kind of community. And so it's been really interesting. I think what I have learned above all is to center authenticity and to be really proud of where I have been and what I have been able to accomplish. And to also kind of acknowledge that right now in this current role as an executive director, as an educated person, as an able-bodied person, that I carry so much privilege. And it is almost like a responsibility, this weight that you know, with this kind of privileged position, it is my responsibility to kind of uplift others that are kind of moving along, that have similar stories as I have. But it's an interesting dance, Virginia. It's been really hard to, obviously, I think when you're part of multiple layers, you experience multiple traumas, multiple microaggressions, at the same time, really, really great successes. And so it's this, while I'm centering not being authentic and being proud of that, I'm also really at the core centering my kind of emotional well-being and this idea of like self-care, because I can only do so much. And at the end of it, you know, I represent Laura Chávez first and foremost, but I also recognize that there aren't that many leaders like me out there. And so there is a level of responsibility. And also, just as I had multiple mentors and multiple people that paved the way for me, I need to do the same. And so it's an interesting dance. But for me, it's like you have to carry everything at all times, all the different layers of you, and be articulate and step up when you need to step up, and also say, not today. There's a lot of emotional labor that I'm not willing to take on. So I need you to kind of do the work. I need to take care of myself. And so it's been really interesting. I think it wasn't until now, and I'm not going to age myself, but in the last couple of years where I have really gained my voice a little bit more. You know, it's been a little hard, you know, when I've been kind of moving up in this kind of game, where you don't feel like you can voice yourself, when you're the only woman in the room, when you're the only person of color in the room, when you're the only, you know, the onlys, right? The only constantly. So it's been, you know, how do I play this dance? And so it's been really relieving to be at a point where I am really confident in my skin, having the privilege that I have, also taking care of myself and playing this dance. And so, yeah.
I think it's so important. I appreciate that you're being so vulnerable with us, because I think it's so important for others in the audience to hear that, you know, you didn't just come out that way, and you've had to grow into that confidence. One thing that I had mentioned when we first met, when we first spoke about you coming and speaking with us today, is that imposter syndrome is something that we see that is common.
Oh, yeah.
Among not only our interns, but colleagues that have been in the field for years, especially among women, other oppressed, marginalized populations. What would be your advice, having gone through this, to these individuals? How do you work through these feelings of self-doubt? You know, I can't help but think of one of my favorite quotes from Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which is, "Women belong in all the places where decisions are being made."
Absolutely.
Women insert, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely.
How do you get past everything going on to trust your voice, trust that you belong at that table?
Imposter syndrome is a big one. It's a daily struggle. I honestly don't necessarily know if it's ever going to go away. For me, what has helped is be super intentional with the positive thinking and ignoring the negative thoughts. And they're going to be there. And so for me, it's like, you know, part of what has happened to me is like, do I really belong here? Do I deserve this? Why me? And so those are all the negative thoughts that I'm like, I have to kind of get rid of with, I do deserve to be here. I am ready for this challenge. And so for me, is like what I would do is have those pep talks constantly, and get people on your corner, and staying authentic, and understanding that some days are going to be harder than others, and it is okay. But it's that daily kind of practice that you have to do from the moment you wake up until you kind of go to sleep, where you have to pat yourself on the back and say, you did this, you deserve to be here. And honestly, I feel like those pep talks have helped, because sometimes I have to like meditate right before I go into certain rooms, because I know some rooms are going to trigger me. Sometimes I know that I'm only going to say 2 or 3 things. And so it's this constant dance. And so that would be the big ones, is like, have a daily practice where you are building confidence, because the imposter syndrome will never go away. And have that daily pep talk. It is a practice that you have to constantly do. And believe in yourself that you are brilliant, that you deserve to be here, that there is a reason that you are here. And yeah, it is you. You are chosen. You deserve that.
And I love something else that you said previously, about how you are there for others who are like you, because oftentimes you are the only one like you in a room. So I wonder, what would you like to see as far as diversity in this field?
I mean, obviously, I think definitely having more leaders of color, more women leaders, more queer leaders. Obviously, I think it's needed. We need more representation in different areas where decisions are being made. But I think more than that, I would love to see actual systems updated, revamped, with marginalized communities in mind, right? So it's like, we can't just have representation at the table if the policies are still uphold systems of oppression, right? You know, what are your hiring processes? You know, what are your annual performance reviews? Do they center equity? You know, I have difficulty when it's like, we need to hire more diversity, but yeah, hire diversity, and then you don't give them any support. They're also paid lower than anybody else. They're thrown in there, and then there's no support around them to encourage them. So it's a lot of work that we still need to do, and it starts with, of course, hiring, but changing the practices, changing the mindsets, changing the systems. So having a really clear conversation around HR, and I would even advise all of you that are, if you're entertaining jobs in the next couple of years or even currently, is to, we are interviewing them as much as they are interviewing us, and definitely ask these types of questions. How do you center equity in your hiring practices, in your annual performance reviews? How are you challenging, systems of oppression internally as an organization from all of these systems, right? Because it takes more than just having a diverse workforce.
Right. I agree. Change needs to happen on a deeper level. Absolutely. And I love that advice about interviewing. You're interviewing the agency as well. And we have a lot of interns in the audience with us today with the SysG group who will be going on interviews. So I think that's great advice. And when we spoke, I also remember you saying you had some unique interviewing questions for candidates who were coming in, who were interested in working with Challenge Day. Can you speak a little bit more on those and what exactly you're looking for in a candidate when you're hiring somebody?
I think, again, you have to, I always say this to everyone, like, interview them as much as you're interviewing. I think for Challenge Day, it has to be a cultural fit. Mm-hmm. I'm not just interviewing a candidate who is the best qualified, right? But it has to be a cultural fit. And I think it's important for the person that is the interviewee to also look for that cultural fit. Is this a place where I feel like I will genuinely be supported? There's going to be room for growth. And also, do I feel like my personal and professional vision aligns with this company, right? Are we jiving in that way? I feel like that's really important. And so, I look for people with that. I look for candidates that have purpose. I look for candidates that have grit. And what that looks like is like, yeah, I see that there's been a struggle, but how did you overcome those kind of struggles? What does your follow through look like? How do you work in a team? How do you set boundaries? I feel like that is also a really good one, right? Boundaries are big. And what I mean by that is, like, I ask a lot of scenario questions where I'm really trying to figure out how they answer kind of ethical questions, or where they set boundaries. If you're a workaholic, constantly a workaholic, for me as a manager, I'm like, this person's going to be overloaded very easy, very fast. And I always tell people, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And so we constantly have to manage everything, right? And so for me, it's like I'm looking also for somebody that has a growth mindset, that is constantly thinking solutions, not necessarily problems. That is an active learner. I think if you come across in an interview when you're saying, like, this is where I am right now, but I am still learning, and I want you to invest in my learning, but I want you to also understand that I'm investing in my own learning as well. So this idea of, like, somebody that's constantly learning, somebody with integrity and purpose, with a growth mindset, and then above all, just somebody that is humble. I look for people like that are just humble, that are a good team player. And again, anchoring equity is big, right? And so I ask a lot of questions around that. Very similar to what you were asking me earlier. How do you define equity, and tell me about your experience, or how would you center, racial justice, racial equity with your colleagues? What are you looking for in an organization questions around those, I think those are important, because then you'll see, is this person doing that work? And internal, right? they're not going to know all the answers, but if you'll understand if you're interviewing somebody, if they're doing some level of work, some level of internal inquiry, right?
Absolutely. So showing a little bit of vulnerability in these conversations is
Absolutely.
helpful.
Well, while still, taking care of yourself, obviously,
Right.
and not saying too much.
Right. Or authenticity,
But
I guess I should
yeah,
say.
I definitely authenticity and I think, I think there's, without question, especially with people that are individuals that are barely coming up, you may have a variety of odd jobs on your resume. So doing a little bit of that storytelling. And what I mean by that is they're going to hone in on that. But I think if you discuss grit, if you discuss a little bit of that storytelling and how you can still, this happened, this is how I overcame it, this is how I was working 3 jobs, I was doing all of it, just doing a really good way. I always see, like, look at your resume. If you see some areas where you know that they will question you in a negative way, how do you turn that into a positive? And I think, working around focusing on follow through and grit, I think is a good way how people can really answer resume questions, right? For me, it was like I had to leave my 4-year university because I had to work. And so then I ended up going from a 4-year down to a community college, because I had to work full time. And so I had to work full time the entire time I was in college. So yeah, I have like 2 or 3 universities on my, not now, but early on in my career, I had like 2 or 3 universities. I had a community college and 2 4 years and all of this stuff. And I discussed, I had to work, but what does that show? It's like responsibility. And there's so much that you learn from work as well that you can apply, and there's also the same things that you can apply from education. And so I think allowing for a really good story will help you.
That's great. All great advice. Thank you. So you mentioned it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. This is hard work. We just love to know what your day-to-day as the executive director of Challenge Day looks like, or your week-to-week, or even month-to-month.
Oh, well, it's funny because I feel like there's a pre-pandemic answer and then there's a pandemic answer, right? But I think part of what is really interesting is, and I do think this is right. When you're a leader of an organization, everyone is looking at you for an example of something, right? And so if I don't want my colleagues, the employees I work with, to be overworked and underappreciated and just stretched, I also need to do that as well. I also need to come across as somebody that is not stretched and overworked. And so part of what I do is I constantly have to voice what taking care of is for me, and also encourage people to do the same. So everything from having more intentionality with check-ins. There's been so many times where I have stopped actual meetings and said, we need to stop this right now. The agenda is irrelevant because I'm sensing from our rectangles or our squares that some of us are having a hard day. And I think we need to take care of ourselves. Obviously, there's so much going on in our lives, and that we need to do that. And we do that, and I do that for myself personally. There's going to be some days that I'm going to take some personal PTO because I need to take care of myself. I play a lot I have 2 kids, and so I feel like there has been 2 things that have been my survival during the pandemic, and one is just almost going to my childlike life and really just spending quality time and finding that joy in the chaos. And so for me, it has been playing with the kids, spending time and just stopping the clock and just spending time with them has been really fun. And the other thing that has been crucial, it has been just being out in nature and anchoring myself in nature. And so going on hikes and hanging out at the park, going camping, whatever it is, just to get out and be a little bit more grounded. That has been really helpful. But as a leader, it has been voicing how I take care of myself, but also encouraging. We added extra days where we closed the office this year, because I knew we were getting to these days where it was exhausting. I think it was like after January, after that like winter break, January, and then there's like nothing for a really long time that we're like, you know what, let's look at the calendar, let's figure out, well, there's this Monday holiday, let's do that Friday off, or I think we did Earth Day. We've never done Earth Day, but we were like, we need something in April because we're about to lose it. Let's close the office. And part of what I have found is it's easier for me to shut the entire office than encourage individuals to take time off, because sometimes they'll take the time off, they're still checking email, or they're like, I just don't have time, I have so much work to do. So for me, it's like, no, we're going to be intentional. We're going to close the office. Do not answer emails. It is take care of yourself, be with your loved ones, et cetera, et cetera. And so we've definitely been more intentional about taking care of ourselves and each other during this time. And so for me, it's just, I have to be the role model of that. And it's been hard. I won't voice when I've been like, I'm wiped out. This is really difficult. I've had to say it, have been a parent working full time in the pandemic has been really difficult. And so, I've struggled a lot, and I've voiced that to my colleagues, and they've been able to support me. So we've been able to create a really good kind of culture of support where, sometimes I need people to kind of step up, and then sometimes so that I can step back, and then I offer that as well to others.
I think that's so important, because when I was working for the city of Miami Beach, I noticed a level of burnout like never before, especially during the pandemic. And to have a leader who's focusing on balance and check-ins is not something that you often see, but it was so crucial just because it's not a normal office setting. We're all in our own respective offices, doors closed, logging into meetings virtually, and you miss out on that personal interaction, which is so important for self-care. So you have to find other ways. And so I love that you were modeling that, or at least trying and focusing on balance.
Yeah, there was this research that just came up a couple of weeks ago about there's an increase, I think, in the workforce during the pandemic. I think we're working about 40% more hours than we were pre-pandemic. Because you're at home, you can check that email, whatever. And I was just like, wow.
And think about also, I also read a research study, no more water cooler conversations. Think about all those water cooler or kitchen coffee break conversations that happen that really make you more connected to the work and your peers. Therefore,
absolutely.
Yeah,
so you have to get really creative. We've had to get super creative. We've done like virtual staff hangouts where we're just like on Fridays, whatever,
that's great.
music. I was like, you have to get creative to still build some kind of connection, but it's
music.
Really tough.
That was a big one for me.
Yes.
Yes. We had something called 2 p.m. turn-ups where just stop everything at 2 p.m. and we just, one person picks a song of the day and we just lighten the mood because everyone's so serious in their offices, so.
I love that.
I feel like we could have a whole other, we're going to need to invite you back to have a whole other conversation about this. This is good. But I wanted to talk about your leadership a little bit more. It seems like you have a very interesting leadership style, a very unique leadership style. How would you define it? And what would you say are your most successful approaches? And have there been any challenges you've had?
I mean, it has been an evolving process. I think, I'm a former counselor, so my background has been in counseling. And so I'm pretty thankful for that kind of background. Because I do, it is a main focus of my leadership style. And so, when I'm working with anybody that I supervise, I kind of take that kind of counselor, mentor, coach kind of mentality. So I am, I definitely am constantly working on, I had a really strong mentor of mine that told me once, like, Laura, if you leave tomorrow, in the organization or your program or whatever still sustains and is still successful, you know you did something well. And so have that mindset every time you're working with people. And so that's literally my mindset when I'm supervising, or when I'm having one-on-one conversations. I have a lot of conversations with them about, like, what do you want to do in 5 years? What do you want to do in 10 years? What is your ultimate goal? And how do I get you to get there? And then I have them lead the conversation. For me, it's like, this hour is for you and your growth, not necessarily for me to give, to check things off. And so what do you want to get out of our hour? What do you want to get out of our 45 minutes? And how can I support you? I find that sometimes staff that are overwhelmed need a little bit more guidance when they're, what do you mean support? I have no idea. I'm overwhelmed, but I have no idea what you're talking about. And so at the beginning, we try and work on goals. I ask that question: what do you want to do? What does success look like in a year? At the end of this, how will you know if you were successful in your role, right? And then we create goals from there, and those end up being a lot of my interactions with my colleagues. I also think that it's been hard, right? We live in I go back to these systems of oppression, but we are in a very hierarchical, kind of oppressive kind of system, organizational, right? Executive director, it's a really strange thing, right? And so it is very hierarchical. And so I'm constantly trying to figure out ways to not be so much hierarchical, but understanding that we live in this system. And so obviously we need to, there's some checks and balances, and there needs to be some kind of order and things of such, but there's also an opportunity for many voices and many people to feel like they can get feedback, that they can be part of the process. And so that's what I would try and do in my leadership style, right? In my leadership and managerial styles, is like really try and get as many voices as possible, and having transparency and saying, like, yes, I want to engage people. At the same time, I hold the biggest responsibility in the organization. I have to make tough decisions all the time. And so there may be some opportunities where you could have more significant impact, and there's going to be some other opportunities where you're not going to have a lot of significant impact. And I need to be transparent in that process. And so I feel like that has helped. What I have found just through my history is that there are some people that at times are going to need a little bit more direction and a little bit more handholding. So I step in when I need to step in, and then I step back when I need to. Ideally, for me as a manager or for a leader, I want to oversee people that need little direction, but I know that at various times in the life cycle of colleagues, they may need a little bit more handholding, and it's okay. It's part of the learning process, right? And I enjoy that. But I also don't want to do too much. I think earlier in my career, I was, I thought that helping my colleagues or the people that I supervise was, I'll just take some of these things from you and I'll just do it. That's actually not helping them. If you leave, like what my mentor said, if you leave, they're not going to be able to get that done. So you need to kind of switch that narrative. You need to actually work on time management, work on, functionality. Like, what are you doing? Are you taking anything extra that should even just get off your plate that's not yours? Like, let's have conversations about what is really on your plate. Instead of me saying, like, I'm going to just take this and I'll just do it because for me, it's really easy to do. I've been doing it for years. That's not really helping them. So being a little bit more strategic and helping them with that, I think it is a better return on investment, right? The employee learns, it ends up being better for the organization. And so I try and do that with my kind of leadership style. And then again, I feel like I've said it over and over again, as leaders, we need to really we need to role model. And then we also need to just center equity in everything that we do, especially when you're in the nonprofit sector. We don't get paid the big dollars, right? Most of the work that we do, it is very passion driven, it's very mission driven. We are by makeup, servants to the communities that we work with. And so we're here because we are passionate. Many of us are reflective of those communities that we serve. And so the traumas, that our community is feeling, many of us are dealing with it personally as well. And so we need to center that. You know, I find it really difficult, you know, to work in organizations that are working with tough communities. And then we have staff that are reflective of those communities, and we're just grilling them to do more work and more work and more work. And we're not, you know, it's like this isn't helping. This doesn't help the long term, right? And so we have to be mindful of all of those things.
Right. And that's where I think your empathy from your lived experiences comes into play, because it seems like equity is always at the forefront of your mind and how you operate. And it's interesting how you talked about the very nature of an organization, no matter who's at the top and who's part of the organization, creates a power dynamic that is not
Absolutely.
necessarily equitable, right? And so how do you create equity in those dynamics? How do you make your organization more flat so everybody feels that they have power?
Yeah, I think I might have mentioned to you before, Virginia, people don't leave jobs. They leave chaotic, toxic environments, you know, and so I'm constantly thinking of all those things, right? Like I want to make sure that they feel like they are positively contributing to the organization, that there is an investment here. Because I know we're in the nonprofit sector. There's not going to be the big dollars like if we were in tech or in other kind of corporations, right? And so
right. And that piece that you spoke about before, knowing your employees, that has been a challenge in my own leadership style, I know. And it's definitely learning how each employee wants to be given a task or wants to be given instructions, and having that situational leadership knowledge is so key, and definitely was a huge learning curve in my career, I know. So
absolutely.
But does help create that positive environment where people do feel ownership of their work. It's so important.
Absolutely.
We've had such a great discussion. I'm gonna stop my questions and close a little bit early on my end, because I've been seeing a lot of action in the chat box. So I wanted to open it up sooner than planned to individuals in the audience, because I'm fairly certain that there will be some questions. So if anybody does have any questions or comments for Laura, please go ahead and feel free to unmute yourself or type in the chat box, and I'll go ahead and monitor it and I can read it. Thank you. I'll give everybody a few minutes.
I have one quick question. One challenge day is working with the public. Do you often work with the schools only, or like, do you make the contract with the schools or with like other organizations?
You were cutting out there a little bit, Erica, but I think your question was, does challenge day work predominantly with schools? Is that what I heard? Okay. Yeah. You know, it's really interesting. We're a fee for service. We also have some grants. And so, and we have various things. We work with corporate groups, with nonprofits, with universities. We have some work with military as well. College campuses, nonprofits, et cetera. And so typically, I would say about a third of our partners call us. They're struggling with something. You know, let's say in their schools, there's a lot of conflict, there's tension, something is happening, and they really want to work on their school climate. And so they call us, and we come in and we do our work. And then we come in and we do our work, and then we provide resources, and then we leave. And other ones, you know, we have funders and we have donors that really want to impact various communities. So we have various donors that are like, you know, I want to work in different regions and provide this kind of work for, you know, for either schools or university campuses or nonprofits. We've done some of our work with kind of community tension. So like everything from like police department with the high school, with various CBOs together in the same room talking about various things. And so it really is pretty diverse in terms of where our reach is. We've also done some work with formerly incarcerated or currently incarcerated communities as well. And so it's a little diverse. And so sometimes, yeah, they call us and they pay for our services. And sometimes we have grants or we have community or corporate sponsors that cover the cost for our services.
Great, pretty diverse array of clients. So we have another great question from the audience. This is from Carrie. Do you think the confidence / voice you've found in recent years can be fostered in young people, or does it inherently come with age? Something I have been wondering myself recently.
Oh, that's a great question, Carrie. I mean, I think it's both. I'm pretty lucky that I had really strong female voices in my upbringing. You know, my sisters, my mom, who were like, you know, very confident in their voice. I've always been confident in my voice. It hasn't come out as articulate as it is now. And so there is a level of kind of code switching and education and that you need to kind of, and confidence boosting that you need to do as with your voice. So it does come with that. I also at the same time find that there is so much value to youth voice, and particularly needed now. And so I do think that it is both. And I try to encourage voice of many young people, especially, you know, especially when you think about social good, right? And the communities that they serve, right? I'm like, some of the most articulate voices are those of young people. And so we need to kind of foster those. We're a little bit more hard-headed as elders. And so I feel like it's both. For me, it's like what I have done in the past when working with young people, it has been about educating and having them understand. One, working on their confidence and saying that your voice is very much needed and necessary. At the same time, you need to find your own kind of internal power and figure out ways to maneuver your voice in certain spaces. But yeah, I think for me personally, I had it. It has been refined over and over again. My internal coach through the various years to find that power.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not an easy road. I wish we could just give all the information to our young ones and they could avoid going through what we have. Does anybody else have any questions? Feel free to raise your hand, unmute and jump in, or type in the chat box.
I have a question. Lara, you mentioned that you get some corporate funding, you get some donor funding. Have you found in the 30 plus years, I know funders have definitely changed in their priorities, and particularly as organizations age, sometimes it can be challenging to get either funders to stay with you, or as you grow in your knowledge of what the needs are of communities, for them to maintain that focus. So we know philanthropy is a little bit behind in what the sector has seen, particularly when we talk about things around social justice and equity. Some are really forward thinking, but some are a little bit antiquated in their thoughts, or don't really want to like shake the boat, I guess you could say. I'm not thinking the right term. Have you have you run into that challenge? And you know, one of the things that we try to really convey to our interns is this kind of ethical viewpoint that that paradox of the nonprofit sector of our goal is to always try to change and sustain change in communities, and this piece of like, you shouldn't be profiting off someone's pain. And so if it's, you know, that you need the money more than you need the work, how do you balance that? And so what advice have you kind of learned as an ED in kind of working with philanthropy to move them towards what you know is right for the community, or what the community has said to you they really need?
Oh, that's a great question. And something that we have been very intentional. I have been very intentional, especially this past year, we have to cultivate all of our donors all the time. And I think there has been some movement. You're right. There's been some really slow process or progress with some certain donors, but there's been some significant progress, right, with others. There's been a couple of things that we have done. I think one of the biggest areas is we constantly have to evolve in terms of what our the dollars that we're going to go after and what our impact kind of looks like. So as an organization, we constantly have to evolve, right? And so there may be times that because our programming, our focus is shifting, naturally, our philanthropic dollars are going to be a little bit different. And so we have to kind of strategize and go after various donors. At the same time, you can definitely evolve with those historic donors as things continue to evolve. And that is through just cultivation, right? I have tons and tons of conversations. I have one specific donor, a foundation that has been giving to Challenge Day for many, many years. And we had a lot of conversations last year and this year about the dollars that they were giving us and us moving them around, obviously because of the pandemic and everything that's going on. And I think really we were allowed to do those shifts because we had that relationship. We had just total authentic relationships throughout my time at Challenge Day. And so they knew we're trusting of this organization because we have that rapport. We understand where they're going. And then at the end of it, you have to, as an organization, provide a really robust reporting and, sustainability report so that they continue to trust you. And so we are changing our focus to meet this need. Can I move you into this area? Can I have you trust? For us, I've tried to stay really relevant. We are trying to stay our community is starting to shift their focus. They're starting to call us for various needs. We are trying to stay relevant to the needs of our community. I'm asking you to also help us continue to stay relevant. Will you help shift your dollars to meet the needs? Things of that matter. But I also again, cultivation is important. And then also doing a really good job with your reporting and your data, and ensuring that because that's going to continue to increase your dollars. And then the other thing is, one of the critical things that we've done at Challenge Day is looked at our funding stream. And this is something new for us. We historically pre-pandemic, we looked a certain way in terms of our revenue streams. Just during the pandemic, we had to completely shift our focus. And so what we historically did pre-pandemic, let's say, earn revenue, it is not the case anymore, right? And if we had a certain amount of grants, it is also not looking the same as well. And so now we had to diversify a lot more our revenue streams. And so we're going after new philanthropic dollars. We're going through perhaps different or new. There are some schools, as an example, that were able to afford us, others are not. And so we're looking at various things now. We're living in a different time. I think we need to evolve as an organization to meet the needs of the community pre and post-COVID. We need to have those conversations with our philanthropic partners about doing the same.
I just had one last comment, so I hope my internet holds up. I just wanted to thank you for being so compassionate and just really being authentic in what you do. I always love seeing that, so it's always important to acknowledge it when I do. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Erica.
I'll piggyback off that. I want to thank you as well for your authenticity and vulnerability during this discussion. Speaking personally, when I have my moments of imposter syndrome, knowing that there are people out there who have made it in their careers and are leaders in their careers and are going through the same thing, and it is a lifetime challenge. Possibly just knowing that helps validate it for me, and I'm sure for others out there who are going through the same thing. So I really appreciate that. Does anybody have any final comments or final questions? We have about 2 minutes. If not, since we have you for a couple more minutes, if you want to share just like one piece of advice for the group before we sign off here.
I mean, I'll just say, keep doing your thing. You've gotten this far. Keep at it. You know, you're here for a reason, and I think honestly, I wake up every day loving my job and loving what I do. I think if you are able to do the same, you know you are in the right place, and know that, kind of be gentle with yourself. If tomorrow changes, that's totally fine. I think at the end of it is like, if you're genuinely happy, everything else is going to do its course, right? And so just, I'm really appreciative and really proud to just see you all and spend the day with you all, and just thank you for doing what you're doing, and for being you.
Well, thank you so much. Great advice. And this has been an amazing discussion. We have some great feedback in the chat. Everyone was very appreciative of you sharing your time, your talent, and your transparency. And we look forward to working with you in the future and seeing all the wonderful things you and Challenge Day do. If there's ever a way we can get involved in this great work, please feel free to share it with me, and I can share it with the audience members.
Of course, sometimes we do free workshops just for anybody. Like, we do some self-care workshops, you know, unconscious bias workshops. So I'll definitely send them to you, Virginia. I feel like there was one super last minute the last time we talked. I'll send you more so that you can share with your network.
Absolutely, that would be great. And thank you everybody in the audience for your time and attention and being present and having great questions and points throughout. Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.
Have a great day.
Bye.